Hey, future CCSPs, we're diving into cloud security today, and a super important part of that is secure software development.
It's really not just about the coding. It's
Yeah.
about building security into literally every step of the way.
Exactly.
Like from that very first line of code all the way to maintaining it. We've got some good stuff here
Yeah.
about the secure software development lifecycle. So let's unpack it.
Yes, let's unpack it. What insights can we glean for your exam prep, right?
The CCSP really emphasizes understanding the process of how you actually develop the software,
Right.
not just all the technical nitty-gritty details.
Yeah,
It recognizes that security is totally tied to how we build software.
it's got to be baked right in. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's start with software development methodologies.
Okay.
I'm curious what some of the common misconceptions are about why these methodologies even matter for security.
That's a great question. One of the big ones is thinking that a methodology is just like a rigid set of rules that kind of stifles creativity.
Right.
But in reality, a well-chosen methodology can actually enhance security by providing a framework to figure out and address security concerns throughout the whole development process.
It's like having a blueprint, right? You wouldn't build a house without one.
Exactly.
So you shouldn't build software without a clear plan either. Let's talk about some specific methodologies then. I know the waterfall method
Yeah, the classic.
seems to be like the classic approach.
The waterfall method is that reliable old friend.
Okay.
Been around forever.
Yeah.
It's very linear. You move through the phases like requirements, design, implementation, testing, deployment, and maintenance. Each one flows right into the next.
Okay.
However, what sometimes gets overlooked is that rigidity can actually create some security blind spots.
Oh, interesting. How so?
So imagine you're like deep in the coding phase of a waterfall project,
Okay.
and all of a sudden this critical security vulnerability pops up.
Oh,
Having to go back and redesign the system at that stage can be like crazy costly and time consuming.
so waterfall strength, this structured approach, can be a weakness when it comes to security.
Yeah, for sure. And that's why we see other methodologies gaining traction,
Okay.
like the spiral model, which addresses this by taking a more iterative approach.
Oh, the spiral model. Yeah. So it's like you're circling closer and closer to a secure solution as you go.
That's a great way to put it.
You're addressing the risks as they kind of pop up.
Exactly.
Okay.
And then there's agile, which is like, agile has just become so popular in recent years.
It's the buzzword. Yeah.
All about speed, flexibility, and responding to change like that.
Yeah. What are some highlights from the Agile Manifesto that really stand out to you in terms of security?
The emphasis on individuals and interactions over processes and tools.
Okay.
It encourages open communication and collaboration, which is so essential for identifying and addressing those security issues as they pop up.
Gotcha. So it's not just about following a strict set of rules. It's about fostering a culture of security awareness and good communication on the team.
Exactly, 100%. And for somebody who's studying for the CCSP exam, understanding these different methodologies and how they affect security
Yeah.
is key. It shows you can think critically about how software is built and how different approaches will impact security.
Yeah. It's like you got to know the lay of the land before you build your fortress, right? Okay, so let's move beyond methodologies now and look at the secure SDLC itself. The secure software development lifecycle. Design, code, test, maintain. I think it's important to point out that this isn't a methodology in itself.
Right.
It's more like a set of underlying actions, right?
That's a great point. Think of the phases as like the fundamental building blocks
Okay.
of any secure software development process, regardless of which methodology you choose. It's about integrating those security considerations into every single stage of the software's whole
Yeah.
journey.
So for each of these phases, we need to be thinking about security, right?
Yes.
So in the design phase, for example, we're not just like sketching out features, we're baking in the security from the very start.
You got it. It's about anticipating those threats and vulnerabilities early on, rather than trying to like bolt on security as an afterthought.
So it's like building a house with reinforced walls and secure doors rather than trying to add them after the house is already built.
Exactly.
Okay, good analogy. And then in the coding phase, it's about writing code that is not only functional, but also resistant to common vulnerabilities.
Yes. This is where secure coding practices and tools like static analysis come in.
Static analysis.
Yeah.
Is that like having a security expert looking over your shoulder as you code, pointing out potential weaknesses?
That is a good way to put it. It helps developers catch those errors early on before they even make it into production.
Gotcha. Okay. And then comes testing. where security really takes center stage.
Yes.
It's not just making sure the software works as intended. It's about putting it through all these rigorous security tests to make sure it can withstand attacks.
What are some of the key security testing techniques that every CCSP candidate should be familiar with?
So penetration testing is a big one.
Okay. Simulating real-world attacks to identify vulnerabilities that you might not catch with other testing methods.
So you're basically hiring ethical hackers to try to break your software.
Exactly.
Find the weaknesses before the bad guys do.
You got it.
What other testing approaches are important?
Fuzzing is another powerful technique.
Okay.
It involves bombarding the application with just like random or unexpected inputs
Oh, wow.
to see how it handles them,
Okay.
hoping to trigger a security flaw.
So it's like you're kind of like stress testing the software to see if it cracks under pressure.
Exactly. And remember, security testing shouldn't just be a one-time thing.
Right.
It needs to be integrated throughout that SDLC. Different types of testing are going to happen at different stages.
Okay, so we've designed our software with security in mind. We've written secure code, and we've rigorously tested it. We're done right.
Not quite. We can't forget about the maintenance phase.
Oh, right.
Software is constantly evolving,
Yeah.
which means security is an ongoing process. It's not a one-time fix.
So even after the software is like out in the wild,
Mm.
you still need to be vigilant about security.
100%.
Yeah.
This is where things like patching, vulnerability management, and incident response become really crucial.
It's like tending a garden.
Yeah,
You got to constantly weed out those threats and nurture the software security over time.
that's a great analogy.
Okay.
And this kind of brings us to the concept of maturity models,
Okay.
which help us assess how well-defined and repeatable our software development processes are from a security standpoint.
Gotcha.
The more mature the process, the more likely it is to produce consistently secure software.
That makes sense. And one of the most well-known maturity models is CMMI,
Yes.
Capability Maturity Model Integration,
Yes.
right? I've heard it's like a leveling up system for software development processes.
It is. That's a good way to think about it.
Okay.
You start at level 1, which is characterized by kind of ad hoc processes and unpredictable outcomes.
Okay.
And then you gradually work your way up to level 5, where you've achieved a high level of process optimization and continuous improvement.
Where do you think most organizations fall on this maturity scale?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
While many organizations are striving for those higher levels, research suggests that a lot of them are still somewhere between level 2,
Okay.
where basic project management practices are in place, and level 3,
Okay.
where processes are more defined and documented.
Interesting. Why do you think that is? Is it just a matter of resources and priorities, or are there other factors at play?
It's complicated,
Yeah.
and there's no easy answer.
Right.
Some organizations have trouble with the cultural shift required to embrace more mature processes, while others just lack the expertise or resources to implement them effectively.
So it's not just a technical challenge, it's also like a cultural and organizational one.
Exactly, 100%. And that's something to keep in mind as you study for that CCSP exam. It's not just about understanding the technical aspects of security. It's also about understanding how security fits into the bigger picture of software development and organizational culture.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've gone from development methodologies to the secure SDLC to maturity models. It's really fascinating how all these pieces fit together to create a secure software development ecosystem. We'll be back in just a moment to continue exploring this landscape.
Welcome back. We're digging deeper into how to build security into that software DNA.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the next topic, though, I'd love to touch on something you mentioned earlier about organizations struggling to reach higher levels of maturity in their development processes.
Right.
I imagine that's a common challenge for a lot of companies.
It is. It's like trying to turn a giant ship. It takes time, effort, buy-in from everyone on board.
Right. You can't just flip a switch and expect everything to change overnight.
What are some like practical steps that organizations can take then to move up that maturity ladder? What advice would you give to someone who's leading that charge?
Well, first and foremost, you got to start by creating a culture of security awareness.
Okay.
It's not just the security team's responsibility. Everyone involved in the development process needs to get how important security is
Okay.
and how their actions can affect it.
So it's about shifting the mindset from security as an afterthought to security as a core value.
Exactly. That takes training, communication, clear expectations from leadership.
It's like any major organizational change.
Yeah,
You got to get everyone rowing in the same direction.
100%.
Now let's switch gears a bit, talk about operations, maintenance, and change management. I feel like we focus so much on that initial development phase
Right.
that we forget that software is this living, breathing thing. It
Yeah.
requires care and feeding even after it's out there.
It's like a garden. You can't just plant the seeds and walk away, right? You got to water them, fertilize them, protect them if you want them to thrive.
That's a good analogy.
Yeah.
So how does change management fit into this picture?
So change management is all about making sure that any changes made to the software,
Okay.
whether it's a bug fix, a new feature, a security patch, anything, is implemented in a controlled and secure way.
So minimizing risk, right?
Right.
Preventing those like oops moments
Yes.
where a change accidentally introduces a vulnerability or breaks something else in the process.
Exactly. And a key element of change management is having a really strong process
Okay.
for requesting, evaluating, approving, implementing, and testing those changes.
So it's not just about developers kind of making changes willy-nilly. There's a formal process.
There is. And that process typically involves 3 key elements: request control, change control, and release control.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the difference between those 3?
Think of it like a funnel.
Okay.
At the top, you've got request control. That's all about capturing and prioritizing those requests for changes.
Okay.
It's like a triage system, figuring out which requests are critical, which ones can maybe wait, and which ones might not be worth pursuing at all.
You're filtering out noise.
Exactly.
Focusing on the most important changes.
Yeah. Then you have change control,
Okay.
which focuses on how those changes are implemented. This includes stuff like documenting the change, getting it reviewed, getting it approved, and then making sure that it's implemented in a way that minimizes risk.
So it's like a quality control checkpoint.
It is.
Make sure that the changes are made thoughtfully with security in mind.
Exactly. And then finally, you have release control,
Okay.
which is all about managing the deployment of those changes into the production environment.
So this is where the rubber meets the road,
It is.
where the changes actually go live.
Exactly. And again, it's about having a controlled process to minimize disruption and make sure the changes don't introduce new vulnerabilities.
It's like a very carefully choreographed dance with each step. It is planned and executed to just minimize risk.
You got it. And for those CCSP folks studying for the exam, understanding these principles of change management is huge.
Right.
Shows you understand how important controlling change in a cloud environment is, where agility and security often seem like they're at odds.
So we've got a handle on change management. Let's talk about DevOps,
Okay.
a term that is everywhere these days.
It is.
From what I understand, it's about bridging the gap between development and operations, breaking down silos, and fostering collaboration.
You got it.
Am I on the right track?
You are. DevOps is all about creating a more seamless, integrated approach
Okay.
to software development and deployment with a focus on automation, collaboration, and continuous delivery.
I'm curious, what are some of the security benefits of like adopting a DevOps approach?
Well, by automating security tasks, you can bake security into that pipeline right from the beginning,
Okay.
rather than treating it as an afterthought.
So it's like embedding those security checkpoints throughout the development process rather than just having like a single security inspection at the end.
That's a great way to put it. And this continuous security approach helps you identify and address vulnerabilities so much earlier in the life cycle when they're easier and cheaper to fix.
It's like catching a leak in a pipe early on rather than waiting till the whole house is flooded.
Exactly. Another benefit of DevOps is its focus on collaboration.
Okay.
Breaking down those silos between the development and operations teams creates a more shared responsibility for security.
So it's not just the security team's job anymore.
Exactly.
Everyone's involved in building and maintaining secure software.
Right. And that shared responsibility helps create a more security-aware culture,
Right.
which is essential for building secure software in these crazy complex environments we work in these days.
Okay, so we've got DevOps, which brings development and operations closer.
Right.
But where does security fit into this? Is it like a separate entity or is it more integrated?
That's where DevSecOps comes in.
Okay.
It's not about adding security as a separate phase or team.
Okay.
It's about integrating security practices and principles into that whole DevOps workflow.
So weaving security into the very fabric of the development and operations process.
Exactly. And that means automating security tasks, empowering developers to think about security right from the start, and building a culture where security is everyone's job.
I think I'm seeing the bigger picture here. DevOps is about breaking down silos and collaborating.
Yeah,
DevSecOps is about making sure security is like a key part of that collaborative process.
you got it. That's a key takeaway for anybody studying for that CCSP exam. It's about understanding that security in the cloud isn't just about technical controls. It's about organizational culture, processes, and collaboration.
Okay,
Big picture stuff.
let's dive into some specific examples then of how DevSecOps principles can be applied. You mentioned how automation can transform security in a DevOps environment.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Automation is a key enabler for DevSecOps. Imagine being able to automatically scan your code for vulnerabilities every time a developer makes a change, or automatically run those security tests as part of your continuous integration, continuous delivery pipeline.
That sounds incredibly efficient.
It is.
It's like having a tireless security robot working with your development team, constantly checking for those weaknesses.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay?
And this automation frees up your security teams from doing those tedious manual tasks and lets them focus on more strategic initiatives.
It's like shifting from reactive security to proactive security.
Exactly.
I've also heard the term infrastructure as code thrown around in the context of DevOps.
Yeah.
Can you explain what that means and how it relates to security?
Sure. Infrastructure as code is basically managing your infrastructure.
Right.
Your servers, your networks, your storage, all that stuff using code.
Okay.
Just like you manage your application code.
So instead of manually configuring servers and networks, you're writing code that defines how they should be set up.
Exactly. And this brings a lot of security benefits. First, it lets you automate the provisioning and configuration of your infrastructure,
Okay.
which reduces the risk of human error
Right.
and ensures consistency across all your environments.
So you're getting rid of the risk of someone accidentally misconfiguring a server or leaving a security setting open.
Exactly. And second, by treating infrastructure as code, you can apply those same security practices and tools that you use for your application code.
Okay.
You can scan it for vulnerabilities, test it for security misconfigurations, and even apply version control
Wow.
to keep track of changes and make sure you can roll back if something goes wrong.
It's amazing. It's like bringing the discipline of software development to infrastructure management.
Exactly. And that's a core DevSecOps principle,
Yeah.
extending security practices and principles beyond the code itself to that whole ecosystem.
So we've covered so much ground here in the second part of our deep dive. From challenges to achieving those higher maturity levels to change management principles to the power of DevSecOps and infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
It's been a wild ride through best practices and strategies for building secure software in the cloud. We'll be back in a moment for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some real-world examples of secure and insecure software development and leave you with some food for thought. Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive. It's been quite a journey, right? Exploring this whole world of secure software development.
It has been. And as we wrap up, I think the important thing is to remember that all these concepts we've been talking about, the methodologies to DevSecOps, they're not just ideas. They have real-world implications. They impact the security of the apps and systems we use every day.
That's a great point. And I think one of the best ways to really understand these concepts is to look at real-world examples.
Absolutely.
You know, those oh wow moments.
Yeah.
When you see how a security vulnerability played out in like a big breach, or how a company's strong security posture
Yeah.
actually helped them avert disaster.
For sure. We've seen some huge breaches that highlight just how important secure software development is, like the Equifax breach.
Oh, yeah.
A vulnerability in a web application framework allowed attackers to get into sensitive personal data.
Millions of customers.
Millions of customers.
Yeah. That was a wake-up call, I think,
Big time.
for a lot of companies.
Definitely.
It showed that even these big established organizations can be vulnerable if they don't put security first throughout the software development lifecycle.
Exactly. And it really emphasizes how important things like secure coding, testing, and vulnerability management are.
Right.
But we've also seen examples of companies successfully implementing these DevSecOps principles and getting great results.
Do you have any specific examples in mind?
Yeah, there are companies out there that have shifted left on security, integrated it right into their DevOps pipelines from day one. They're automating that security testing, giving devs the tools they need to write more secure code, and they're fostering a culture where everyone is responsible for security.
It's great to hear about those success stories because it shows that building secure software isn't impossible. It's doable with the right approach.
Exactly.
And the right commitment. Now, I know we've been talking about this from the perspective of somebody studying for the CCSP exam, But for our listener, how can they apply these concepts in their own work,
Yep.
even if they're not directly involved in software development?
That's a good question. Even if you're not a developer, understanding these concepts can help you make better decisions about the technology you use and the vendors you trust.
So it's about being a smart consumer of technology, asking the right questions,
Right.
advocating for security.
Exactly. If you're helping choose a new cloud service provider, you can ask about their secure software development practices.
Oh, okay.
How do they build security into their lifecycle?
Yeah.
What kind of testing do they do?
Right.
How do they handle vulnerabilities?
So it's about doing your due diligence, making sure the companies you're trusting with your data are serious about security.
Yes, exactly. And if you're in a leadership role, you can really push for a culture of security awareness in your whole organization,
Okay.
encourage training and communication, support those secure development practices, and make security a priority across the board.
Lead by example, then.
Exactly.
Show that security is everybody's job. Now, as we wrap up this deep dive, what's one final thought you want to leave our listener with?
As you keep working towards that CCSP certification, remember that security is a journey. It's not a destination. Those threats are always changing, so you got to stay curious.
Yeah.
Stay informed and never stop learning.
Don't just memorize the facts for the exam, right?
Yeah.
Strive to understand the principles behind them,
Yeah,
how they actually work in the real world.
absolutely. And don't be afraid to try new things. Experiment. This whole world of secure software development is constantly changing. So embrace the challenge and keep pushing those boundaries.
Great note to end on. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into secure software development.
It's been a pleasure.
We hope you got some valuable insights to help you on your CCSP journey and beyond.
We do. And best of luck with those cloud security endeavors.
And to our listeners, keep those questions coming. We're always here to help you navigate this complex world of cybersecurity. Until next time, stay secure.